Yeah, I think we're ready. I was hoping to get a couple more people on the call, but I guess this is recorded because I have kind of a couple announcements to make. First of all, y'all should have turned in graded assignment one, part one, before class today. If you did not turn it in, please do so at your earliest convenience. It allows us to see where you're at. It allows us to, if there's something you're not understanding, something you just don't get, it allows TAs to help you diagnose that, figure it out, and get you the intervention you need so that you understand it, so you can be successful for graded assignment number one. As a reminder, graded assignment number one, the full assignment due on October 10th is a drop assignment. That means if you do not complete it, you will not be able to remain enrolled in this class. So that is, we break up graded assignment one into graded assignment one into three parts to kind of give you some scaffolding and help you build up the skills you need to be able to do a big programming assignment like this. Parts one and two are not drop assignments. So for instance, you did not turn in graded assignment one, part one before class tonight, get it in as soon as possible, check in with your TAs. Announcement number two, use your TAs. Your TAs are awesome. You have such a talented, dedicated group of TAs here to support you. I am personally, as a course manager, so thrilled to know about to have your TAs on staff. And I want to see you utilizing them. In Canvas, there is the office hour docs that has most of the TA's office hours available. You do not have to go to just your TA's office hours. We provide you everyone's office hours so you can find the ones that fit in your schedule best. You'll notice some of them require an appointment. Some of them have drop-in office hours. There's a good mix of both. So do what works with your schedule. And if you find a TA that you sync with, that works really well with your schedule and with your learning style, of course, that can be someone you reach out to for questions. You are not limited to just your TA. And as a friendly reminder, we do have two floating TAs that are not anyone's assigned TAs. Those are TAs Bree and Selena. Both of them are, resources to use and utilize as much as you can. We'll have two more TAs joining staff next week, just to kind of provide you with even more support. But what we're saying is, I know it can be really, really hard to ask for help. It can be really hard to admit you need that help. But no one learns to code alone. You reach out to each other, reach out to your TAs, ask good questions, and develop those problem-solving skills that you need in order to succeed in this class. So if you have any issues with, if you're having issues, reach out proactively, reach out now. Don't let yourself get further behind because it only snowballs. My final announcement. If you haven't reviewed the code of conduct, most of you should have signed it when you came in. You came in signing the code of conduct. That's the only way you were admitted into this class. I want to remind everyone that we take this code of conduct very, very seriously, and we will remove students from the class based on violating the code of conduct. If you experience something that makes you uncomfortable, that includes harassment or misgendering or making your information public that shouldn't be made public, or any of the things that are outlined in the code of conduct, please reach out to me. You will not be retaliated against. I may ask you questions to make sure that I understand the situation, but I take the code of conduct seriously. So abide by it, be a good human. And if someone makes you feel uncomfortable, or if you see someone violating the code of conduct, please bring it to my attention, because we want to keep this the safest space possible for you to learn and grow and succeed in. So I hate making that announcement because I want to trust you all are here for the right reasons with the best intentions, but I also want to make sure that you know that my number one job is creating a safe learning environment for you all. So I think with those three announcements, any questions about any of those three announcements?
No.
Okay, I don't see any I'm just taking a quick look at the chat. all of them are pretty self-explanatory. So awesome. I will pass it on over to Carrie Jones. Carrie, you ready to take it away and blow some minds with strings and arrays?
Yep, let's do it. So I had a little bit of a family emergency this week, and I also had a massive migraine yesterday. And so I'm going to tell you guys right now that I don't have slides for everything, but I do have materials to go over things. So no sweat. But I will actually add in the slides later so that it's just complete for you guys to represent some of the things that I don't have slides for. And I apologize. I, really try to get this stuff done as much ahead of time as possible. But I have had an extraordinarily busy week that did not go as planned, but that's all right. We will get through this together. Flexibility is key, right? All right, so without further ado, let's get into the slides. All right, today we are talking about strings and arrays. We've got announcements, which Clark just did most of already. And then lecture on strings, lecture on arrays, and then we'll, do a brief intro to the studio. You guys will break out and do the studio together. And then we'll come back and I will go over the solution and answer any questions that you have. Okay, so Clark just went over the deadlines, and this was on here last week, but I just wanted to make sure it's in front of you. And also this office hours document, this is linked in the announcements channel, and so is the sign up for the accountability partner, this little survey that Clark put together. So I wanted to make sure you had those links here as well. And that's it. Well, okay, is that it? Yeah, the other, I guess the other announcement, if you want to call it that I wanted to make, and I will just pull this up so you guys can see it. Whoop, hold on. I've had several students that have contacted me and we're still confused about trying to work through all of that extra code that's in your graded assignment starter code, right? You've got functions and modules and all these extra files. So if you have not taken a look at this video that I posted in general, this was posted yesterday. Tuesday at 2:36 p.m. So you can find this in the general channel. Take a look at this video. It's very short, 7 minutes or something. And I will just kind of help you understand a little bit better how you're working within that code that is so much more complicated than you understand right now. Because I know it's overwhelming. You go in there and you're just like, okay, I only have to add a few lines of code, but this is a lot. Like, how do, where do I put my code? How does this all work? So make sure you take a look at that. I also replied to it down here to talk about variable scope, which is something we will talk about actually next class. When we do loops, we'll start talking in more depth about variable scope, but I've got a little bit about it here in terms of what you need to know for the grade assignment. If you've already finished part one, you've probably figured a lot of this out, but I would just want to make sure you know these resources are there. Also, if you go up to the top here and you hover on this second little bar, drops down, this is where, you got the Zoom link, you've got the playlist on YouTube for all the lectures and reviews after class, and then the PDFs for the slides. And then there's another one here that's the document you see behind here. That's the extra practice exercises. So all of that is available to you there for easy reference. Okay, so let's get back to the lecture here. With strings, we're going to talk about strings and characters. We'll talk about bracket notation and immutability, string properties and methods, the length property, a number of different methods that belong to strings, and template literals, which we covered a little bit. The template literals we covered a little bit during the review last week for those of you stuck around, but I'm going to go over it again today. All right, so what is a character? A character is just a string with a length of 1. And in JavaScript, characters do not have a separate data type like they do in some languages. They're just strings, but we refer to them as characters. And when we say that, we're just referring to a single character. Okay, everybody check your mics. Got somebody that's unmuted, getting a little bit of feedback. Okay, so in this example, here, A plus B plus C equals ABC, how do we expect that to evaluate?
True.
True, right? Okay. So we have, 3 strings and 3 characters right there, right? And then they get concatenated together into one string, and that is absolutely true. Those are equal. So, a string is just a collection of characters, but it has a specific order. It's ordered from left to right. And you can prove this by taking a look, and I just jumped the gun, but A plus B is not equal to the string BA, and that is true because the order matters. So in order for that would actually be AB, not BA, right? Okay. So that's kind of the basic, and you guys have been working with strings a lot enough now that you kind of know, how this works. So let's talk about the length of a string. When we talk about the length of a string, we're basically just saying how many characters does it have. But you have to remember that this includes spaces and special characters, not just letters and digits, right? So look at this first string, A, B, C, D, E. How many, what's the length of that string?
5.
5.
Okay, and then hi there.
9.
8.
9.
9.
It's 9 because there is not only a space, but there's also an exclamation point. See, it's tricky, isn't it? Okay, how about 436.20 as a string?
6.
6.
6. Perfect. Yeah, because the decimal is also a character. Okay, so you got the hang of that. This is important. I know it seems really simple, but it's important because you need to be able to visually gauge what the index is. And now we're going to talk about indexing. Strings are 0 indexed. That means that the very first character is actually not 1, but 0. And then the last index is 1 less than the length. And the index itself is actually a number, not a string. So take a look. Hold on. Can't see my thing. I just need to adjust my screen here, guys. Hang on just a second. Oh boy. Okay. So the plural form is, you're going to hear me say one of these. I'm going to probably say indices most of the time because that's what I'm accustomed to, but it is also correct to say indexes. So if you're talking about multiple indices, you might hear it referred to as indexes or indices. Just want to make sure that's clear. Terminology wise, because it helps to know the lingo, right? Okay, so let's take a look at A, B, C, D, E. What would those indices be? Call them out, left or right.
0.
0,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
4.
Yeah, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exactly. So again, it's 5 characters long, but the last index is 1 less than that because the very first index is 0. So that concept, again, is definitely, you're going to have to just get to the point where you know this in your reflexively. You think, you don't even have to think about it, and you'll get there. But I'm going to, kind of call it out for now and just make sure that you fully understand so that you can, as you're practicing with this stuff, it'll get easier and easier. Okay, so on the next example, what is the index of the capital H?
0.
0.
Good. What's the index of the space?
8.
2.
2.
2. Good. What's the index of the R?
7. No.
6.
6. Good. And what's the index of the exclamation point?
8.
8.
8. Yep, because it's 1 less than 9. Okay, let's do this one more time. What's the index of 3?
1.
1.
1. Good. What's the index of the decimal point?
3.
3.
3.
And the index of 0?
5.
5. Perfect. Okay, so everybody understand this now? Start with 0 and end with 1 less than the length. That's how this works. Okay, so now that you kind of got a sense of how that works, we can talk about bracket notation. In order to access a specific character in a string, there's this thing called bracket notation. And And this is how it works in JavaScript. So you put the index number inside brackets, as you can kind of see from these examples I've got down here. And you can use it on a variable that has a string value, or you can use it directly on a string. But that's pretty rare. So let's look at the rare case first. Let's say we have this string Jasmine and we want to find the third, we want to find the character that is at the third index. We can put the brackets on like this. Yeah, and what would it be? It would be M. That's correct. 0, 1, 2, 3. And so most of the time, it does not make sense to get the index of a hard-coded string like this. And you know, guys, you know what I mean when I say hard-coded? I mean that we just have typed the string out as a string without assigning it to a variable. Most of the time, you're going to be working with variables. And so these other examples are going to be a little bit more relevant. But I wanted to make sure you understand that because all a variable does is store a string, they're kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? You can use one or the other. I can't think of the word I'm looking for. Interchangeable. That's the word I want. They're interchangeable. So in this other example, we have first name, let first name equals Oliver. That's the code, right? So if I wanted to find the character that's at the second index of first name, this is how I would do it at the second index of Oliver, since that's the value. So what would that be?
I.
Good. And at the fourth index?
E.
Great. Okay. So there again, it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the way that Oliver is indexed. Awesome. Okay. So this concept of immutability, it's a big word. We don't really use it much for lots of other things, but it just means it's unchangeable. And in JavaScript, strings are immutable. You can't actually like drop in and just say, I want to take that one character and just swap it out. Okay. You have to actually replace the entire, like the value of the entire variable. So, you can try to do this with bracket notation and it's not going to work. So let's take this example on the right. Let initials equal JT. Because you've got somebody from a generation that was all about Justin Timberlake, right? And then some young person comes along and says, who's that Justin? I'm talking about Justin Bieber. So let's change that T to a B. And I know this is a really silly example, but bear with me. So you might think, oh, I could try to just say initials at index 1, because this is 0, 1, right? Needs to be set to B. I'm assigning B to that position. So it turns out that is not valid. So if I were to actually go back and console log initials to get the value right now, what would I see?
JT.
JT, that's right, because it doesn't change anything. Okay. But on the other hand, you can update values with bracket notation. You just have to assign it properly. So you would replace the previous value by building a new string and assigning it to the original variable. So let's look at that. We would say initials equals initials at index 0, which is
J.
and then we concatenate that with B, and then initials is
JB.
you got it. So
BT.
So yeah, it would be JB. Because now we've taken part of initials, just the first character at index 0, and we've concatenated it with a new string value, and together that now is JB. And just to make this clear, so the reason this works is because we are taking this new expression, initials at index 0 plus B, and assigning it just to initials. So we're overwriting the original value with a brand new value that we're constructing using concatenation. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're going to be getting lots of practice with this, building strings and, reassigning them to the same original variable. So, no worries. We will show this to you many times. Okay, so string is actually, a string is something that I think you probably learned early on in some of your reading is called a primitive. But it actually has an object structure, which means that it has not just a value, but it also has properties and methods. So it's not just a sequence of characters, it has properties and methods. A property in general is a stored value. It's some piece of information about that object. And a method is a stored function. So it's some sort of mechanism that's going to execute some code and it's going to change something or return some sort of value. With strings, specifically the string object, it is never going to change the original string. It's just going to return a new one because, again, strings are immutable. So it has to actually replace it. But some of these methods that belong to the string object help you do that in a snap because you don't have to do it the long way. So you're going to learn more about objects in general in chapter 12 when we get to class 7. But for now, just to so you understand, when we throw around these terms, properties and methods, that's kind of, this is the basic model of an object, of the string object specifically. So the variable, of course, you give it a name, and in this case, the name is name. Not very original, but there it is. And that returns a string type, right? And then you can use this property name.length, and that returns a number type. And we've got index of, these are just examples, we'll go into them in a second. Index of, finds the index of a particular thing, returns a number. So they return things to you, but they don't actually change the value of name, the original value at all. So let's look at these kind of one by one and look at some examples. The length property, all you have to do is attach .length to any string and you'll get a character count, okay? There's no parentheses after .length because that's only, parentheses are only used for methods because they're functions. But remember, this is just a property. It's just a piece of information that's going to be returned to you. So for let dessert equals pi, what if I want to get the length of dessert? What do I do?
.length.
Yes.
Desert.length.
Dessert.length. I can just take the variable and tack on .length. And then, of course, what is the what does that evaluate to?
3.
It evaluates to 3. That's right. Okay, so let's go to the next one. We've got fruit, which is the concatenation of key space plus lime. So how would I get the length of that?
8.
Fruit.length.
Fruit.length, and that is 8. That's correct, because that space is included. 4 plus 4. Good. Okay, and then this last one, I'm not creating a variable here. I'm just starting with an expression. So I've got this expression, fruit plus the string space plus dessert. So I'm combining variables and strings here to make a new string. This is another example of how you use concatenation to construct a string. And then I put it in parentheses because I want the program to evaluate everything inside the parentheses first and get the outcome of the string that evaluates to, and then take the length. So I tack on length to that entire expression, and then what do I get?
11.
12.
12, right. And here's what it looks like. Yeah, you've got 8 plus 1 plus 3, and it's keyline pi. So you're going to find that this is a very common way to construct strings in web design, although more typically we use template literals because they're easier to read, and we'll get there in a few slides. But if you're using concatenation, it's very common to see it done this way, a variable, a string, a variable, you kind of pull it all together, and then you end up with something that actually displays for the user that's what you intended for it to say. Okay, so let's look at some methods. The first two are 2 uppercase and 2 lowercase. These do exactly what you think they do. You can attach either of them to a string to change their case. And of course, it will apply to all of the characters in the string that actually have a capital or a lowercase. It doesn't do a thing to like numbers or special characters, only to letters. And when we say that we are attaching it, what we're really saying is we're going to call a method. You're going to hear this term thrown around a lot when we get to functions too, because methods are functions. We call a function, we call a method. It means we want this method to now go get us, do something for us and bring us back a result. So the parentheses are always left empty for these particular methods. You don't actually have to give it any information. And so let's see yes. So the things to remember in general that we talked about before, string methods return a new string and they do not change the original string. And if you need to save the new value, you have to assign it to a new variable or reassign it to the original variable. So let's look at some examples here. We've got let happy equals woohoo. I know that didn't sound very exciting. Woohoo. Okay. Everybody give me a woohoo.
Woohoo.
Woohoo. There you go. Okay. So let's say we do happy to uppercase. What would I expect to see?
Bigger woohoo.
Woohoo in caps.
Yeah, which sounds like
Woohoo.
yeah, exactly. It's more exciting, right? Woohoo! All right. So a big old woohoo, right? Okay. So what if I go and I console log happy now just to see what the value of happy is? What is it?
The W would only be
The
uppercase.
original one. The original small.
Yeah, it's the
Original,
original
yeah.
one. That's right. Because again, just because I evaluated that expression happy to uppercase, I didn't actually assign it to happy and
Oh.
update it. Okay. Anytime, just so you guys know, kind of, I'm limited on how much space I have on these slides. And so I'm not actually putting the console log in there, but that's essentially, if you were doing this in an IDE, and we will look at some examples with actual code, but this is kind of basically what I'm saying is if I were to console log this, then it would evaluate to a value. Okay, that's kind of this, the format that I'm using here. Okay, so now we have an actual line of code in dark blue. Let ecstatic equal happy to uppercase. What do I expect ecstatic to be?
All uppercase.
Yeah, big woohoo. Okay. So now if I go and I console log happy,
Original.
I get the original one still. Yes, that's right. Okay. And then if I say I want happy to now be all lowercase, just because it serves the purpose of this example, I can actually do that, successfully changing happy to be not the same as the original by reassigning it by saying happy equals happy to lowercase. And now I would expect to see lowercase woohoo. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
So
the happy two like does it doesn't change the original, but it resets what the now most recent thing is for happy. Is that correct?
So the expression itself, happy dot to uppercase, it's going to evaluate to uppercase is going to return something that's a modified version of it, but it doesn't affect happy. And like I could go to ecstatic right now and do console log ecstatic, dot to lowercase. And if I go back after that, and I would get, a lowercase woohoo, just like we see down here at the bottom. But if I were to go back then and console log ecstatic, it would still be uppercase because I didn't actually assign that new value to it. So this second to last one here, happy equals happy to lowercase, that's how you actually update the variable with the new value.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, and that's important because you're going to see some methods, not uppercase and lowercase, but you're going to see some other methods that work a little bit differently for strings than they do for arrays. And this is why, because with strings, you can't update the original value unless you actually overwrite it by reassigning it to itself. Okay. So trim and replace. Trim returns a string that doesn't have leading and trailing spaces. And replace and you give it the characters you want to swap out, and then you give it the characters you want to put in. This returns a new string that just has whatever you told it to swapped out. So some examples here, we've got, user input name is blank JSON. So I'm providing this as, let's say that leading up to this, I was accepting user input in my program, and this is what the user gave back to me. They gave me blank JSON, but that's not very useful for what I want it for. So I'm going to clean it up a little bit. This is where trim comes in handy, because trim can go in and take it and say, hey, take that leading space off. And if there was a trailing space, it would do that too. And just come back with the real content that we're trying to get to. So I've assigned this to the variable name so that I can save that new version of it. So what does name evaluate to?
JSON with blank removed.
Yeah, JSON with no blank, exactly. Because I created this new variable name, I took user input name and I trimmed it. And so now name is storing that trimmed version JSON. So let's say we want to, now we realize that that's still not ideal because it's lowercase, because poor Jason, he was lazy and he just was not paying attention when he was typing this in. So, or maybe he didn't care, but that's okay. We're going to fix it. So the first place I've got to start, if I want to capitalize that upper letter, is to go get it, right? So right now, name at index 0 evaluates to what?
J.
Lowercase j.
J.
Lowercase j, right. Ooh, I've got these out of order. My bad. There we go. And then name it. But if I take that same character, name at index 0, and I change it with to uppercase, then we expect to see
uppercase J.
Uppercase J, right. So I have this knowledge that I can access the original letter, and I can also modify it, access it and modify it with to uppercase. And I'm going to use that now to go in and replace this. So while you can't just go and say, change this letter, change letter at name 0 to J, you can use the replace function and then it'll do it for you. Josh has a question. Josh? Yes, no? Okay. I'm sorry?
Yeah, sorry. I thought you were about to say something. But I was gonna ask, is there like a method that removes excessive white space in like a string? Like, i.e., just say,
Not exactly. There are heckorig problems about that. Yeah, you'd have to go through a couple of steps to accomplish that. Trim just takes off the front and the back. It doesn't look at the middle. But there are some other things that you can do to work with that. And maybe we can, I don't know if I have examples of that in my practice exercises or not. It's been so long since I checked out some of them, but it can be done. And if I don't get to it by the end of class, remind me and I'll show you how. Okay, so, right. So the next thing is we are going to say, okay, I still want to use the variable name, but it needs to be updated now. So we're going to take name and we're going to reassign it and we're going to construct something new. So we take name and we use the dot replace function, method, and we give it the values that it asks for, right? So the first one, if you remember from up top here, I use my mouse, is characters to swap. And so the character we want to swap is name it index 0, which is that lowercase j. And then the second argument here, or parameter, the parameter is new cars or cares, new characters. And so we give it, we want to give it an argument that is the value, the new value, which is the name at index 0 to uppercase, as we already established, lowercase j, and we want to replace it with an uppercase j. But most of the time when you're working with code, you don't want to hard code that. You want to actually refer to it. Because let's say this was an automated program. You want this to run no matter what the name was, right? So you can't just say J and uppercase J, because the next person who comes along, their name might be Mary or, Jessica. So Well, Jessica's a bad example because that also starts with a J, but you get my point. So yeah, so you're going to feed in this information to this replace function, and it's going to do the work of swapping it out. And now your new value should actually be Jason with an uppercase J. Aisha? You have a question?
Yeah, thank you. So in that last example you gave, we had to reassign everything to the variable name again in order to see the updated information. So does that same follow for that line just directly above where we, excuse me, reevaluate, excuse me. Sorry, folks, where we changed the J to an uppercase letter as well. In order to see that change, we have to reassign that to name or a different variable. Otherwise, it would still show the same.
Right. Yeah, so on the third line here, this is, again, just my way of saying, let's evaluate what this is. And so the way you would do that in the console, in your program would be to console log it. So you could say console log name, and the console would spit out lowercase Jason. And then you could say console log name at index 0, and it would kick out lowercase j. And then you could go and you could say console log name at index 0 to uppercase, and it would kick out uppercase j. So you can do little things like that to make sure you're getting what you think you do, like temporarily. So, the main thing what I wanted to represent here is that you have to think of these things as smaller units in order for something very, very long like this to make any sense to you. I wanted to show you that this represents J. So when we feed this in, we're basically saying, I want that lowercase first letter to be changed to that uppercase second or uppercase first letter. Does that make sense?
Okay, yes, thank you.
Okay. And yeah, and then reassigning it at that point is exactly what I need to do if I want name to be changed. Okay, good. Let's go. Next, we have includes, index of, and slice. Your textbook, I don't think actually shows you that includes is a string method as well as an array method, but it is. So I'm going to show you how that works. Includes, and you give it a substring, returns a Boolean true or false based on whether the substring is found in the greater string. Okay. And index of actually returns a number, and it gives you the index where that substring begins. And if it can't find it, it returns a -1. Either way, it's a number. And that's useful sometimes, that -1, to be able to tell if something is found or not. Dot slice, you give it your starting index, and then you give it the index that's right past the last letter that you want to pull out. And that's going to give you, it's going to extract a substring as a new string based on those indices that you provided. So let's look at this example. We've got let name equal, oh, I've got one more, sorry. It's valid to use dot slice with just start if you want to include everything to the end of the string. You don't have to say, you don't have to give it the last, number, because then it'll just say, okay, you want it all the way through the end of the string from that first point, no problem. So we can show you how both of these works. Let name equal launch code. Name, oh, yeah. Okay, so this is a big oops, right? Because launch code actually doesn't have a space. So let's see if we can take that out. So I know that name dot includes is going to evaluate to true, right? Because I can see that it's got that space there. So, but this is how that works. Name dot includes evaluates to true. So I'm going to say, I want to set a new variable, and I want that variable to be this index that I'm looking for. So how would I find the index of the space?
Name dot index.
Dot index.
Then you put it. The
Index of space.
yeah, correct.
Perfect. Yeah. Name dot index of, and then give it the string space. And it will go and it'll find the first one that it comes across, starting from the left. And in this case, that's all we need, right? So what do I get? What's the index?
6.
It's 6. That's right. Okay. So now that I've done that, I can actually create a new value for the name to replace the old one. And I'm going to do this using this slice function that helps me I'm going to go extract just the word launch, and then I'm going to extract just the word code. And I'm going to concatenate those together. And I'm going to make use of the fact that I know exactly where that space is now. And so I can reference it that way and break this up and get these two pieces that I want. I can tell the computer how to split the string. So the first half, name.slice, what indices would I give it to pull out just launch?
0,6.
Okay, 0. But let's say we're not going to hard code 6. So what would we use instead? What have
0, space IDX.
Space IDX? Yeah, that's why we stored it in a variable, is so that we could go and reference it, right? Because we went and we found it, and now we can use it. So that's going to basically go, and it's going to take everything that's from indices 0 through 5, because remember, you want to give it the one that's right after your stopping point, right? Stop +1. That's going to pull LAUNCH because it's 0 through 5. And then that'll be your first part. And now we're going to concatenate it with name.slice. And what can I give it here to get the rest of it? Code.
Space IDX +1.
Exactly. Space IDX +1, because we don't want to include the space. We want to start on the index that's right after space. And then we only have to give it the one argument because, again, on that fourth bullet point up there, I said it was valid to use just start if you want to include everything to the end of string. So we don't have to specify that it needs to go through the letter E. If we did, we could still give it that, and we would just give it, well, you tell me, what would we give it? What would be a way for us to tell it to calculate that number?
Name.length.
Yeah, name.length, right? Because the second one should be stop +1, and you know that the length is actually the last index +1, right? So you could actually modify this. I can't type into it right now, but you could modify that. Instead of saying just that, you could give it that second one. But since it's the very last one, you don't have to. So we're going to leave it off. All right. So now what does name evaluate to?
Launch code.
Launch code, right? No space, because we left it out. We were very, very precise in leaving it out. And then name index of space is now what?
-1.
-1.
Good. Yeah. Okay. Esther has a question.
I think I'm getting lost. I don't understand the +1, -1, where it comes from. Maybe if you can repeat that part of dot slice.
I would agree. I feel like I got lost halfway through. I'm not too sure.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk it through. Because this is hard to get your head around the first couple of times. Let's go back up and look at this third bullet point here, where it says that dot slice takes 2 arguments. There's the parameter start, which is the first index that you want. In this case, for us, if we were doing launch, that would be 0. And then stop +1. And I'm actually, you know what, I did mean to put something on here to show you what I meant by stop, and I forgot to do that. In this case, stop, I'm referring to stop as being the last letter of the string we want. So that would be the H. And H is index 5, right? But the way that slice works, you have to actually give it the next index, and then it knows to cut it off, everything up to that index, not including it, but up to. So that's why I said stop +1. So that would be H +1. That's the space index, which is why down here, we actually say, okay, I want you to go from 0 to space index. So that way it'll include all of the characters from 0 up just before space index, just before the space. Does that help?
So it gets rid of launch entirely.
It doesn't get rid of it. It actually grabs it. Like name.slice will actually say like that whole thing evaluates, this first part evaluates to
I
launch.
got you. I
Yeah.
get it now.
Yeah, because remember, you're not modifying name, which is why we have to reassign it. You're basically rebuilding it. You're saying, okay, go grab me just this part, and then go grab me just this part, and then we're gonna, concatenate them together. And the one bit that you're leaving out is the space. You're just grabbing everything before it and grabbing everything after it.
So the +1 is the problem. Where is it coming from?
This one, this is because the way that this works, your start index has to be the first letter that you want. And we don't want the space. We want whatever comes right after the space. So if the space is at index 6, we actually want to start at index 7 because that's the first letter of code. And then it'll take it all the way.
That I got now.
But is it taking that entire word then, once you give it the index of the first letter of that word, is it grabbing that whole word?
Yes, in this case, this is an example of the fourth bullet point up here, where if you want to include everything at the end of the string, all you have to do is give it the starting index, and then it's good. So if I just give it space index +1, it knows to go to index 7.
Now I'm reading that.
And then it'll just take it all the way to the end, and so you get the whole thing. This is very common, so it's important that you remember that you don't always. Now, I could have used the second one, and that was where we were talking about. You could take name.length, and that would give you, the end one that you need to get all the way to the E, but you don't have to.
Carrie, can you explain to me the +1 on the third line where it's name equals name.slice, that line?
Yes, I wasn't understanding the
What is
+1
the,
either.
yeah, what is the purpose
right
of the
here?
+1? Yeah.
Yeah, again, this whole expression right here represents code, right? We don't want the space, we just want the word code. So the space, we know the space is at index 6. We actually need index 7. So the way that we tell it to find it is to say, whatever that space index was, just add 1 to it, and that's going to be the first letter code.
Okay.
Okay. You just have to remember everything's relative. So you just kind of have to make use of the information you have and then tell it where to go from there. So you say, I know where the space index is. I found it. I used index of to find it. But where I want you to start is 1 after that. So you give it space index +1.
So if I do a space index +2, then I would just get ode.
That's right.
It
You
wouldn't
get
work like
ode.
that, right? And then
Right.
it's going like that. Okay.
Exactly. Okay, still got a couple hands up. We're going to have to move on in a second, but any last burning questions?
Real quick, what's the point of doing the let space IDX? Couldn't we have just used all numbers and completely got rid of that? So instead of space IDX, we could have just used 0,6.
You could have, but what if you had another word that was I don't know. I'm trying to think of another example of this. Let's just say you had 2 names, like my name, Carrie Space Jones, and I, for some reason, wanted to remove the space. You wouldn't know necessarily where the space is. That's a bad example. I'm going to give you my full name, Caroline Jones. Okay. So now the space is no longer at 6. It's now at 8. And you need your program to be able to handle it no matter what the word is that comes in.
Okay, so this is more of an example if we had a whole bunch of different names and we just wanted to get rid of all of, okay, all right.
Yeah, because the thing is, what you have to remember is you are coding to make sure that your computer can handle any data that it receives, right?
Right.
And when you guys are getting user input from people in these programs that you're writing for graded assignment 1 and graded assignment 2, because you're going to do it again, you have to make sure your code can handle anything that's thrown at you. And so you want to use references to data rather than hard coding the values themselves, because then that's only going to work for certain data and not for others.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a very important concept, so I'm glad you asked about it. Yeah, so that's why for me, I was thinking ahead, right? Because I could have on here instead of having a variable here, I could have just put name.index of space. And then over here, again, I could have put name.index of space. But I was like, you know what? I know I'm going to need to use this twice. So why don't I stick it in a variable and then I can just use the variable. It's a little cleaner, right? So it's up to you, kind of, you know, like making those kinds of decisions. Do I want to go ahead and store that in a variable and then just use the variable, or do I want to use the entire expression name.index of space both times? But they're equivalent, right? And either way, they represent the number that you don't know what it is, depending on what the string it comes in. Okay. We really are going to have to move on. I'm sorry, because we still have a lot to cover before you guys go to studio. So hold your questions or put them in the question channel that I can look at later, or that your TAs can answer for you. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Template literals. We'll cover this real quickly. So the idea about template literal is that you can create a string, you can construct a string combined with text and variables, characters and variables, without having to concatenate them with like a plus sign or a comma. You don't have to do that anymore if you do it this way. So you don't use quotes, you use backticks. And you use placeholders to put, you know, in certain spots in the string where you want to insert variables or expressions. So this process of adding data in place in the string is called string interpolation. And I'm going to show you how to do it for JavaScript because that's all you need to know for now. Later in this course, you're going to learn how to do it with other technologies as well. So let fave author, my favorite author, Agatha Christie. So I've got, you know, this name is now stored in a variable. I've got a string and I want to put it into a sentence. So I can say, you know, I've got this whole template literal, which it goes from backtick to backtick. That's the template literal. And then I can put a placeholder in. So what would that placeholder be? What is that going to look like?
$ curly braces.
Exactly. $ curly braces. That's the syntax. And then what do I put into it so that I can get the value out?
Fave author.
I put the variable name. That's right. And I could also put an expression that evaluates to something. Somebody asked the other day in somewhere in the chat, they were asking, can you put comments in there? And the answer to that is no, because I checked. You can't put comments in there, but you can put anything that evaluates to a expression in JavaScript. But a lot of times you're just going to put a variable just like that. And so now we would expect the sentence to be.
I love reading mysteries by Agatha Christie.
There you go. Okay. And you'll notice that I didn't have to worry about, you know, whether I added spaces or not, because I just put a space before the $, and then I had no space between the placeholder and the exclamation point, and then my text went in exactly the way I needed it to. So it's really nice because it's a very much a WYSIWYG thing. You know, what you see is what you get. You just have a placeholder. Otherwise, you write it just like you normally would. It's very, very useful. If you have not seen, if you didn't attend the follow-up, the studio review last class and you haven't watched the video, I get into a lot more detail with how to do this. So you might want to go and look at that if you're curious. I also have an exercise on this here, template literals. Oh, yeah, they're examples, but I've got one of those in here. Okay. We need to fly through arrays now. So let's.
Excuse me. Sorry, maybe I don't know what is the benefit of having the tempo literals.
Because it's much easier to read than having to piece together a string using a bunch of plus signs or commas. And yeah, it's just much easier to read. You can kind of keep everything together in one unit. There's also other benefits if you're doing multi-line formats. That's what that video, if you go watch that video, I show examples of how to do a multi-line thing from your studio that you were doing in last class. So take a look at that and it'll help. Okay, arrays. We got a lot to go through here, so let's talk about it. Arrays and ordered list, how to create arrays, bracket notation, the length property. This sounds familiar, right? There's a lot of similarities to strings, but there are also differences. So we'll get into that. Methods, method chaining, multidimensional arrays. All right, so the structure of an array is that it's a collection of data. You use square brackets to define an array, and each piece of data is called an element. So just like a string is made up of characters, an array is made up of elements. So when we talk about elements, we are referring to all these little pieces of data. Elements are separated by commas. And a JavaScript array can hold multiple data types. That's not true for other languages, but it is true for JavaScript. So let's look over here. We've got this first array. This is the entire array from bracket to bracket. And Zinnia is an example of an element. It's a string. And then if you look at that next example, you can see this is where I'm showing you how in JavaScript you can have multiple data types. So we have a string, we have a number, and we have a Boolean, and they're all in the same array, and that's perfectly legal in JavaScript. So then array length and indexing elements. So length is exactly as you'd expect it to be based on your knowledge of strings. It's just the count of elements, right? It's the number of elements in it. And the other thing you need to know about arrays in JavaScript is that they can grow or shrink. You can have a varying length, and that's not true in some other languages, but it is in JavaScript. And like strings, arrays are zero indexed. So if we look at this, and they're ordered, but they're not sorted, okay, automatically. They're not necessarily sorted. But by ordered, of course, we mean the same way we do with strings, which is it's, indexed from left to right. So you start with 0 and go all the way over. So you can see in this example of all these numbers, it goes from 0 to 7 because there's 8 elements. It has a length of 8. Okay, so creating an array, it's often initialized with an empty array because you may not know what's going to be put in it just yet. But you can also initialize it with it already having elements in it. That's totally fine too. The variable name should generally be a plural noun since it's a list of things. So you're going to want to get used to that idea that because it's a list, it could potentially have multiple things in it. So use an S on the end or an ES. That will help you understand your code. It'll help somebody else understand your code, that you're talking about a list of things. Okay. So the next thing here is, you would reference an element with bracket notation, array name at index, just like you do with strings, because elements are kind of, similar to characters in that way. But unlike strings, oh, wow, that escalated quickly. Okay. I must not have, I didn't do the rest of my transitions properly. Sorry, guys. It seems like I do this on at least one slide every week. Okay. So you can add or replace elements in place, but which you can't do with strings because arrays are changeable, they're mutable. So these examples, let's initialize this array cars with an empty array. And then we'll say, let's add a value. So we add it by using bracket notation saying cars at index 0 is Mustang. And so now we would expect that if we were to get the value of the array cars, we're going to see that array with Mustang in it. However, if we go in and we get the value of cars at index 0, we're only going to see the string, right? And this is an important distinction because how you reference things influences what you get. If you just say the array name, you're going to get the full array. If you specify a certain index, you're going to get the value of the piece of data that's at that index, that element. Is that clear? So here's another example. You can actually initialize something for the first time with values if you want. So we have Italo and Hamlet, and then we say, okay, I want to, this is an example of replacing, not adding, right? I'm going to actually say, I want to take Hamlet out of there and replace it with King Lear. So I just say, I want plays at index 1 to be King Lear now. And then if you go and you console log plays, you're going to see the newest update of that, which has Italo and King Lear. Okay, now
I have a question about the last slide.
Uh-huh.
Or kind of, is So in my head, I was thinking when you have the index, normally what we were doing, I don't know if this is because it was length or if it's because this is with the, what do you call it, with the brackets. But I was thinking index for Mustang would be, for 0 would be M.
Well, that's because that's if Mustang, if you were taking, if you were going to get the index of the string itself, the element, but you're getting the index of the array because the array is cars, right? That's a very important thing to understand. And I'm glad you brought it up. You know, cars refers to the entire array and each element has an index. So if you remember back, I don't think I can get that back that fast, but if you remember back when we had the original examples, you had an array of all those numbers, right? And each of those numbers I showed you, it had a different index, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is how that works. So the very first element that's in the array, which is that entire string, that's what's at cars index 0. And then you get the entire string. Make sense?
I guess. So is it because you have the open bracket after let cars, there's the open brackets, and is that saying that Mustang is an array because it's in brackets? Is that?
No. Okay. So cars, what I did here is I created a new array by saying let cars equal an empty array. I used the brackets, but I didn't put anything in it. And then I said, I want to add something to that array. So I said, I want element 1 of the array cars to be Mustang, that entire string. And so now I go and I console log cars, and there it is. I've got Mustang as a string inside my array. It's no longer an empty array. Now it has Mustang in it.
So that Mustang on that line does that. Okay. So cars bracket 0, index 0 with Mustang, that is sitting in, that's now inside of an array. I get that. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So if you're referencing now, I want to go see exactly which piece of data, which element is at index 0 inside this array, and it's Mustang.
But what happens when you initialize with elements? Is it just because it's multiple pieces that you know it's an array?
It's because it has brackets that JavaScript knows it's an array. I'm actually going to talk about that on the next slide. To make sure you understand that aspect of it. And this is, this is an example here of how you initialize something with 2 pieces of data already. And then you come in and you say, okay, I want to change the one at index 1, which is Hamlet, to King Lear. And now when you go and you console log plays, you have the updated array, which is Othello and King Lear. Okay, let's look at kind of what you were talking about. I think if you wanted to create an array, but you don't know what you're going to put in it yet, why can't you just declare the variable name? And, technically that declaration is valid, but both the value and the type are undefined. And so, JavaScript does not know that it's an array if you don't actually give it the brackets and initialize it to an empty array. You can't add items to an array that still doesn't actually exist. So the solution is to initialize an array with, brackets, which is either empty or it has things in it. But either way, initialize it with brackets so that JavaScript knows that it's an array, and then you can do anything you want to it after that. So in this example, we've got let books, and that's valid. When your code will compile with that. But then if you actually try to move on and do something with it, it's going to have start to have problems with it. So yeah, I have another point there. That's okay. So let books, this is untyped. It doesn't know that it's an array. And if you go and you console log books, it's going to tell you it's undefined. And then if you went and you actually, oh, and I have a let in there that shouldn't be there, but if you just said books, yeah, ignore the let on this line, that shouldn't be there. Books at index 0, and you say, I want to create an element for this array, and I want to, add this book hidden figures. Guess what happens? You get a type error So as soon as you try to run the program, it's going to go, oh no, you can't do that. Because books doesn't know that books is an array. So you can't access an index of something that's undefined. So the solution is to create an array. And here's another example with, cars, where we say I want to have, Mustang be the first one, and I want Charger to be the second element. So they're at indices 0 and 1. So you go ahead and add those 2 lines of code to put them in there. And now when you go and you console log cars, you should get an array that includes the elements Mustang and Charger. So for clarity's sake, if for nothing else, make sure you always initialize it to something. Mike, you have a question?
Yes, I do. You have to do those, like he got cars 0 Mustang, then cars 1 Charger. You have to do those one by one. You couldn't just put them all in at the same time.
You absolutely do not want to ever do it that way, probably. But I'm just showing you, this is baby steps. So we're going to get there in a minute, and you're going to see other ways to add things that is a little bit more efficient. We'll get there. But this is just, it's a very good question, because you're right, that's very inefficient, but it's legal. And I just wanted to show you that if you were going to assign something that way, this is how you do it. Okay.
On the last slide where you had the line through hidden figures, because so let doesn't exist there, I get that, but
right.
If the index also didn't exist, would that then be a legal line to just put books and then I guess you'd be initiate, and
you'd have to initialize it to an empty array first, and then it would work.
But I mean, didn't you initiate to untyped is different than parentheses that's empty. Sorry, got it.
Right. The only way that JavaScript knows that it's an array is if you give it brackets. The brackets are essential. That tells JavaScript this is an array. So you can't, if you do this, it doesn't know, and that's why this breaks. Even without the let.
So do we always need to initialize the array first?
You have to create it, but you can't, like we did on the previous slide, you can go ahead and put things in it. You could have initialized it to, this if you wanted to. But a lot of times you don't know what you're going to put in it yet. So you just go ahead and create it with an empty array. It just depends on what your needs are. So you just kind of evaluate it based on what you're trying to accomplish. Okay, so this is similar to strings. Array is an array is an object. So it has properties and methods. Again, a property is a stored value, and a method is a stored function. But the difference here is that array methods can alter the original array and return a value, because arrays are mutable, they're changeable. So the array variable, this example, let's say you have an array called items, and that says string, and that's totally wrong. Sorry, guys. Wow. It's supposed to be an object. So I'll fix that, I promise. That shouldn't say string right here, it should say object. Items.length is an example of a property. It is pretty much the only one you're ever going to need, probably, and it's number. Just like string. And then there's a number of methods. We'll get into them. Index of and includes sound familiar because they pretty much work just like they do for strings. They go and find, but in this case, they would find a whole element and not just a character. And so index of returns a number and includes returns a Boolean, just like it does for string. And then items.join, gives you a connector and, or you give it a connector, like what you want to join it with, it gives you string. So these are examples. I'm going to give you, actual examples of these, but that's kind of where we get into it. So with length, similar to the other, you just attach .length. There's no parentheses because it's not a function. So you would use decor.length to get the length of this array. And what would that be?
3.
Okay, and then if we have another array, veggies is potatoes and onions. We could,
One.
hold on. So we could go and we say, okay, I want veggies at index 0 to be carrots, and I want veggies at index 2 to be peas. So first, what does veggies resolve to? 2.
Are you asking with all three?
It's undefined.
Oh, veggies. No.
There's
Oh, no,
no
no, I-
value.
Carrots, onions.
Will be 4, 3, 4.
It's actually 3, because what we've done is we've gone and said, okay, I want the element at index 0, which was potatoes, to now be carrots. I'm replacing it. But then I want to add a third element at index 2, which is peas. So now I have carrots, onions, and peas. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
You can always add an element to an index like that just by saying an index that isn't on the original.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, that's what we were doing before, right? On the previous slides, we could start with an empty array and then we could add things by, in fact, you can use an index that's like several indices off. Like, let's say you only have 2 things. I could have said that this was veggies at index 9. And basically what would happen is all of those ones in between that we didn't define would just be null. They would have place, they would be like a placeholder essentially, if you ever want to put a value in it, but that's actually legal. Okay.
Wait, there was a veggies 2 was veggie, the bottom one that says veggies 2, isn't that
Right.
trying to replace the second place mark with peas?
Nope, because remember we're 0 indexed. And so it goes 0, 1, 2. Carrots, onions, peas, 0.
Oh, I'm
1.
sorry. I didn't even see that bottom. I was looking at let veggies still, and I only saw
I was too.
up to, thanks. Yeah, I only saw up to 0, 1, and I was confused.
Yeah, well, right. So I'm saying I want to add one on. I want to add a third element and put in it at index 2. And so
Okay, that makes more sense.
and
Thank
that's
you.
how you get this. Okay. So more methods. We have includes and index of. These work, as I said, just like they do for strings. You get a Boolean true or false if the element is found. And you get a number for the index of, and if it doesn't find it, it'll be -1, just like strings. So let's say we have sports, and we have these 4 sports, and I say sports dot includes golf. What do I?
True.
It's true, right? Right, because it's right there at index 2. Okay, and sports includes soccer.
False.
Okay, so sports dot index of golf.
2.
True.
And then sports index of soccer.
-1.
-1, that's right, because remember, index of will always return a number, so if it can't find it, it's -1.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Now let's talk about reverse. Reverse flips the order of elements, returns the array with the reverse order. And the original array has been altered. So we've got, this same sports thing, basketball, football, hockey, golf. I've just got them in a slightly different order. If I reverse them, what would I expect to get?
Golf, hockey, football.
Basketball.
Exactly. Okay, so let's say I go into my code now. Let's say I've console logged that. And that's what the output was. And now I go into my code and all I do is just say sports.reverse, go do it. And then I console log sports. What am I going to see?
Basketball, football, hockey, golf.
Exactly. It flipped it back. Because if you console log it, it also goes and does it and it changes the array. So then if you do it again, it's going to change it back. So let's do it one more time. Let's say right after that, I go and I say sports.reverse. I console log sports.reverse. What do I get back?
Golf, hockey, football, basketball.
Exactly. And if I was to go and console log sports again at that point, that's what I would get because it has updated the original array in addition to giving that back to me. So again, it takes an array it changes it, and then it also gives you back that value. Emma?
So you don't need to use like the assignment operator here.
Right.
You can just, okay, cool.
Yeah, and like I said, even console logging it does it. So like if it's in your code, it just flipped it for you. That's what you have to remember. It's very different than the way it works with a string. Well, and dot reverse, I don't remember if you can use that with a string or not. I'm gonna have to try that. Okay, so dot sort, let's talk about this. This alphabetizes the elements and returns the sorted array. Alphabetize is being the key word here, because it treats numbers as if they were strings, which makes it really interesting. So the original array has been altered, just like the other ones. So same thing. We got let nuts equal pecan, walnut, hazelnut. Those are not in alphabetical order. If I just put in a line of code that says nuts.sort, and then I go in console log nuts to see what the value is, what do I expect to see?
Hazelnut, pecan, walnut.
Exactly. And so here's another example. Let numbers equal, and these are in numerical order already. So you're probably going, aren't they already sorted? And I'm here to tell you, no, they are in fact not, according to JavaScript. So I won't make you call this one out. I'm just going to show it to you. It would actually be 100, 16, 2, 22, 34, 90, 6, and 90, because it treats them as if they're strings and alphabetizes them according to the digit, like string value. Okay, so just remember that you can't use not sort to get dot sort to get them into numerical order and like by their actual value. So there are ways to do it. We're not going to go over that right now.
Excuse me. Excuse me. On the part of numbers, maybe on the slide of numbers, why was, okay, what is the difference between starting with 100 and not 16? What is the criteria that JavaScript uses there?
Sorry, let me go back. Come on.
Because all of them are starting with 1.
Because the next number is always going to go to the next one if they're the same. And then the next one, 0, is actually smaller than 6.
Can I make a comment about that?
Yeah.
I don't know if this was the question, but I read in the textbook, it helped me when they related it to the alphabet and explaining that like 1 is letter A and 2 is B. And so when you're alphabetizing like apple versus banana, you just look at A versus B. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
yeah, it always looks at the first one, and then if they're the same, it goes to the second one. So in this case, 0 comes before 6, so that's why. Yeah. Okay. You can play around with this, hop into a REPL and put a bunch of numbers in place and see if it behaves the way you expect to, and you'll see it for yourself. We are going to jump into, this is where I don't have slides yet. So we're going to jump into this. Let's see, this includes other array methods. We already talked about some of these. This is reverse. And, oh yeah, okay. So if you, let's just talk about Splice, because we're really running out of time. We have run out of time. So I need to get you guys into your studio. So we're just going to talk about this for a second. Splice is something that, can you guys mute your mics, please? So right here, if we wanted to add to array 1, and this is there's these arrays up here, and I'm sorry, this is probably not helpful because the array is way up here. I'm going to move these down so you can see them. Slice. Here we go. All right. Here they are. All right. So if we want to actually add Bulldog to array 1 so that it's the third element in the array, we are going to need to give it, we're going to say array 1. My My delete key is not working. What the heck? All right, array 1, and then we're going to say splice. This is different from slice. It's splice to actually like remove or add things to an array. And the first thing you do is identify where you want something to go. And in this case, if we said we wanted it to be the third element in the array, that means index 2, right? And if all we're doing is adding something and we're not deleting anything, then we only need to just put in that first one. But we do have to give it the value. Sorry, that's what we have to do. Yeah, there's actually a third. If you were deleting it, there'd be a third argument here, but you have to do 2. So 2 in Bulldog. So where do you want it and what do you want it to be? And then if I go and I console log this, and I'm going to have to comment all of that out so that it doesn't break. Let's run it. Still, I must have missed something. Yep, I missed a whole bunch more. Okay. Sorry, guys, this is not ideal. Yeah, so now if I console log array 1, it's console logging lots of things. All right, adding to array 1 with Splice. So now I see that I actually have Fraser, Niles. Oh, it didn't do it. What did I do wrong? Array 1 Splice.
Semicolon.
Say it again. Oh,
With a semicolon missing.
that shouldn't matter. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go to.
I think in the book you had to put that 0 in the middle section to say you're not deleting anything.
Yes, thank you. Okay, I'm sorry, guys. I had it backwards. I thought that went last, and thank you. All right, so I just, yeah, clearly I haven't used this one for a while. I apologize. It's been a week. Okay, so yes, now you can see that when I log this, I get Fraser, Niles, and then Bulldog, and then it picks back up where it started. And Marty is no longer at index 2, it's now at index 3, and so on and so forth. So this is how you insert. Okay, so now instead of inserting, what I want to do is replace something. So I'm going to replace at index 5. So we're going to say array 2, and I'm going to use Splice, and I'm going to say I want to go at index 5, and I want to replace 1 element, and I want it to be Abby. Oops. Okay. Okay, now here you see that instead of Donna, instead of CJ, we now have Abby. I'll take CJ over Abby any day, just for the record. But yes, so that's how you replace something. You actually say, here's where I want it to go. This is how many elements I want to remove. And then this is what you add in. All right, so the last one, we're just going to remove something, but we're not going to actually add anything in. So array.
Question, real
Yeah.
quick. Sorry, if you had put 2 there, it would have taken the Donna as well then.
Exactly, yeah.
And it would have replaced both those with Abby. Okay, cool, thanks.
Yep. So you can see now it's just got Abby and Charlie. Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put that back for next time. Okay. So now we want to remove something, but we're not going to replace it with anything. This is where you can leave a third one off. Okay, so index 4 is the instruction. And I want to remove 1. That's all I have to tell it. I'm not giving it anything to add. So what I expect then is that Tahani is going to disappear from this array. Oh, is that right? Yeah, index 4. Yep. So we should just see Jason and Janet there. Yep. Okay. Is everybody clear on how that works? Okay. Give me just a second. All right. Okay, so creating new arrays from other arrays, this is where you can actually use Slice. And it does work similarly to the way it does for strings. So I'm using this terminology called subarray. It's not really necessarily a technical term, but it's just to distinguish when I'm talking about, it's kind of the same idea as a substring out of a string. right? I want to take a partial, like just a portion of the array and pull it out. So if I take array 3 now, and I actually get index 1 through index 3, I can say I want to do array 3 and do subarray, oops, not subarray, slice. And I want you to start at index 1. And I want through index 3, which means I need to give it 4 so that it knows to stop at 3. Again, that's that whole +1 thing right there. And that should be it. But I need to console log the array in order to see it. All right. Oh, no. My bad. I'm silly. This is not going to change the original array. This is going to give you something new, so you have to store it. I'll just call it sub array 3. And now, and then just to show that, yeah, sub array 3. I should read my own instructions is what I should do, because it said to do this. Okay. All right, so here we go. We're right here. So using slice to create a subarray from array 3, I have now gone and gotten index 1 through 3, Eleanor, Chidi, and Jason, by telling it to use slice from index 1 to index 4 so that it knows to only grab these 3. And I know that's weird, but that's the way that it works. So yeah, slice 1 to 4 gives you these 3. And now I've stored that in this new variable subarray 3, and I've logged it here and you can see it, but you can see that the original array is still the same. So this allows you to take a copy, essentially. It's just a copy of a portion of the array. I can create a complete copy of the array by just using .slice or .slice at index 0. Console log, and I'm just going to do it straight. Array 1 .slice 0. And yeah, it's exactly the same as array 1 up here because I've just gone from 0 and go all the way to the end. That works just like string does. All right, now there's this concat function that allows you to take 2 arrays and put them together. So let's get this combined array variable. And we're going to say, we're going to take the first array, array 1, and concatenate it with the second array. It doesn't, the only reason this order matters is just which one you want to go first. So whichever one you want to be first, you call the method concat on that one, and then you give it the other one that you want to go second. That's all you do. And then I console log combined array. It's not coming up. It's all right. All right, and now you can see that I've got a single array that has all of the elements together with all the ones from the first one to the second one, and it just blended them together into one big array.
We're going to do 3 arrays. I don't think we have 3 arrays, but on the concat, so it's at array 1 dot concat parentheses array 2, and then you would just do comma array 3.
Nope, you would actually call the method again. This is called method chaining. It's something that I want to talk about tonight, but we're probably not going to get to it. But this is, you can actually just keep adding things on. And basically it says whatever the outcome is from this expression, then you call this on it. So because we know that this is going to give you a new string, I'm sorry, a new array, you can call concat on it again because you can call that on an array. So now this array gets yet a third one added in. So now if I go and I run that, you see we have all 3 combined together into one big array. That's method chaining. I have a whole exercise. I actually have it right here. I have a whole exercise on this in here, method chaining right here. That shows you how to use it with strings and arrays, and even to convert strings and arrays to one another, which is exactly what I'm going to show you right here. So using join will take all of the elements of an array and combine them into a single string. So let string from array 3 equal, and then we'll take array 3 and say join, and then we have to give it a delimiter. We have to say we want this to be the thing on which the thing that binds them all together. And in this case, the instructions were to use a space. So join with a space between everything, and this is creates a string. So if I console log string from array 3, you can see we have Michael, Eleanor, Chidi, Jason, Janet, all as one string with spaces in between each name. And these were drawn from each of those elements that were in that original array. And you can do that with anything that you want. So I could even change this from being a space. I could change it to be like space dash space, run it again. And now you can see I've got space dash space between each one of them. This is incredibly useful. So let's change it back to that. And then let's say that we're going to use we're going to create a copy of array 3 by actually using split on the array we just created, or the string that we just created. So let array 3 copy equal, and now we're going to start with the string. And then this is actually a string method, but it works with, it creates an array. So this is why I didn't bring it up before. String from array 3 dot split, and then you tell it what you want it to split on. Go find this character. Now we know that I just joined them together with spaces, and I'm saying, okay, that's how I want you to divide it up. I want you to find all the spaces and split it all up. And then what that should give me is an array that looks just like array 3, because I used the same delimiter. So console log array 3, nope, array 3 copy. And let's try it out. Okay, yes. So Michael, Eleanor, Chidi, Jason, Janet, it's back, and it's an exact copy of the original one up here. Or at least the last way that we modified it, right? Okay, so I need to get you guys to Studio, but this is, these are, a lot of different ways that you can play around. The exercises are going to give you a lot of, the exercises that you did for this class, your prep exercises, should have given you some decent experience with this. These practice exercises, and I've got so many of them, string basics, string methods, template literals, practice with arrays, strings versus arrays, so you can understand the differences when it's confusing, method chaining, and then multi-dimensional arrays, which I don't even have time to cover right now, but it's here. You can use these as a way to have more practice. And I highly recommend it, because the faster that you guys get comfortable like manipulating strings and arrays, the easier it's going to be to do all the things. These are building blocks. Like everything you do after that depends on you just nailing this down. So go ahead and put the time in now and nail it down, and you'll get there.
Where is that listed? Sorry.
This is, okay, so this is one of the things that's at the top of the general channel.
Okay.
It is right here. If you go into this little 3 dots, it's right here.
Cool, I'll find it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get you off to Studio, and I'm sorry we didn't get to cover everything. We pack so much in these first few classes that it's hard to get through it all. Okay, so your Studio for tonight is 8.6. Let me go to the next page. Yeah, so strings and arrays, you have 3 parts. There's 3 repet links. They're here right at the end of each of the sections. So you'll have different starter code for each one of these. The first one is string modification. You're just going to practice manipulating strings with some of these methods that you've learned. and it's telling you to use it template literal. So it'll give you practice in doing that. And you can modify the code to accept user input. And that way you'll kind of get some experience with making sure that your code can handle anything that's put in, right? This is a great way to test that your code works. So you can do that. Arrays and string conversion. This is where you're actually going to really start working with arrays. And you're going to use some of these things to actually switch things, back and forth between arrays and strings. And this is the split and join that we just talked about. That's super fun. And then for a bonus mission, if you have time, multidimensional arrays, and you can actually, and this was in the book. I mean, there's a whole section on it. It's actually right before the exercises, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they explain this. So if you haven't already read or done anything on this, it's explained here in your book. Okay. Sorry that this ran late and that you're going to have less time for studio, but you guys work together, you'll get it done faster. We've established that. So with that, I will let you go. Let's come back at, I can maybe have a shorter, let's come back at 8:10. And then I will do a review on the studio. Sound good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. See you guys in an hour.